imagine a stone is just hurled through the air,
Okay.
and mid-flight, by some completely inexplicable magic, that stone suddenly gains consciousness.
Right.
It feels the rush of the wind, it feels itself moving forward, and it actually thinks to itself, I am choosing to fly.
I love that analogy.
It's wild, right?
Okay.
But according to the 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza, you are that stone.
We all are, yeah.
Exactly. And every single choice you think you're making today, from, I don't know, what you ate for breakfast to the career you're pursuing, is just a complete illusion. It's an illusion born entirely from your ignorance of the wind that threw you.
Yeah, so Spinoza basically argued that we only believe we have free will because we're blind to the deep, invisible biological causes and environmental causes too, honestly, that are actually dictating our behavior.
We're just flying rocks.
Exactly. Flying rocks, congratulating ourselves on our excellent aerodynamics.
Which is, that is a genuinely terrifying perspective on the whole age-old free will versus determinism debate.
It really is.
And it's actually the exact starting point for today's deep dive. We're exploring this fascinating text that attempts to solve this massive philosophical headache by finding a really specific middle ground.
A very unique middle ground.
Yeah, one that completely redefines how we understand human consciousness. And it does this by blending ancient philosophy with biology, psychology, and even theology.
Right, and what's so fascinating here is that the author's framework challenges some of the most foundational assumptions we have in Western thought.
Totally.
Ultimately, the text suggests that your level of free will, it isn't just this fixed human trait you're born with. It's actually something that wildly fluctuates, like from minute to minute, based entirely on the internal mechanics of your mind.
Which we are going to get into, but we should be crystal clear up front about the sources here.
Yes, definitely.
This text draws really heavily on Islamic theology. So it specifically utilizes verses from the Quran and traditions from the Hadith to kind of cement its psychological arguments.
Right.
And we want to tell you, the listener, that we are not taking a theological stance here, and we're not endorsing any specific religious viewpoint.
No, not at all.
The goal today is just to impartially unpack the original author's intellectual architecture, I guess you could call it, so you can explore the mechanics of these ideas for yourself.
And by the end of this deep dive, you might honestly completely rethink what it means to actually be sane.
Yeah, sane versus mad, which is a huge part of this. So to really appreciate the author's middle ground, we kind of have to look at the two extreme ends of the spectrum that they're trying to bridge.
Right, the extreme viewpoints.
You already mentioned Spinoza on the strict determinism side.
Yeah, and Spinoza didn't just use that flying stone as some abstract metaphor. He actually applied it directly to everyday human behavior.
Like what?
Well, he pointed to things like a crying baby seeking milk, or a coward running away from physical danger, or even just a drunkard babbling at a bar.
Or madman.
Exactly. Spinoza claimed that in all of those cases, the person believes they are making a conscious choice to cry, or run, or speak.
Because it feels like a choice to them.
Right. But in reality, he argues they're completely at the mercy of impulses that they just cannot control.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because Spinoza is basically saying that when I wake up and I choose to drink coffee instead of tea this morning, I'm just a rock being thrown by biological winds.
According to him, yes.
But I feel like I made a choice. I feel the friction of deciding. How does our text deal with that? But wait, before we get to the author's answer, we need the other extreme.
Right, the other side of the spectrum. Sitting on the complete opposite side, the text brings in René Descartes.
Okay, Descartes.
Yeah, Descartes looked at the natural world and drew this massive, basically uncrossable boundary between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom.
Right, the whole animals are just machines thing.
Exactly. He argued that animals are essentially just biological meat machines. Like, a dog barks at a stranger not because it has the conscious agency to choose to bark, but just because its internal mechanical gears reacted to an auditory stimulus.
So the dog's just a complex clockwork toy.
Pretty much. Descartes relegated the entire animal kingdom to the realm of pure mechanics. But, and this is the key, he exempted humans.
Because of the soul.
Yes. He argued humans possess a soul, we belong to the realm of pure thought, and therefore our will is entirely untethered from the mechanical laws of nature.
Okay, so we've got Spinoza saying everything is determined, even humans. And Descartes saying animals are determined machines, but humans are completely magically free.
Right. And the author of our text looks at both of them and basically argues that they both failed for the exact same reason.
Which is what?
They didn't properly map out the actual psychology of the mind. They both treated free will as this sort of magical, intangible aura.
Like a superpower we just happen to have.
Exactly, but the author counters that freedom is not magic. It is a highly specific, mechanical process of the intellect.
But wait, if we reduce the intellect to just a mechanical process, doesn't that just prove Spinoza right? Like, if I'm just a machine running a process, how is that free will?
Well, that is where the author introduces this really brilliant concept. The author solves this by breaking the intellect down into 5 sequential mechanical pillars.
Okay, the 5 pillars.
Right. The argument is that free will is simply the end product of this 5-step engine functioning correctly. And if any single pillar is missing, the mind essentially shuts down and your freedom vanishes.
Okay, so walk me through the engine. What's step 1?
The first pillar is perception. This is just the raw sensing of external objects.
Like seeing or hearing.
Yeah, your eyes seeing a shape, your ears registering a specific frequency.
Okay, let's ground this in a real-world scenario so we can actually see how the engine operates.
Hmm.
Say you are sitting at a restaurant and you're looking at a menu. Perception is the literal act of your eyes taking in the text and the pictures of the food on the page, right? But perception alone doesn't give you a choice.
No, not at all. Which brings in the second pillar, preservation.
Preservation.
Right. You can't simply sense things and then let them instantly evaporate from your mind. Your brain has to actually vault those thoughts and images.
Oh, because if you don't store it, you have nothing to work with.
Exactly. The text notes that without a storage system for ideas, the will has absolutely no drive because it literally has nothing to desire or avoid.
Okay, so in my restaurant analogy, preservation is knowing what a hamburger physically is.
Yeah.
Because your brain held on to that concept from a previous time you saw or ate one.
Yes, exactly.
And I guess that leads naturally to the third pillar.
Which the author identifies as memory. This is the active ability to recall those preserved concepts when a situation demands it.
Okay, so recalling the taste of the burger.
Right. And then we get to the fourth pillar, which is really where the true heavy lifting of human consciousness happens.
Lay it on me.
Inference.
Inference.
Yeah, inference is the intellect's ability to pull from memory, compare those stored ideas against what is currently being perceived, and then actually calculate what is beneficial versus what is harmful.
So, back in the restaurant, inference is my mind actively weighing, like the memory of how heavy and lethargic I felt after the last giant hamburger I ate against, say, the crisp, light feeling of eating a salad. I'm actively running a simulation of the consequences in my head.
That is exactly it. You're running the calculation. And that brings us to the final fifth pillar, which is will.
The actual choice.
Yes, the ultimate execution of a decision. Accepting or rejecting an option based entirely on the calculations you just made during that inference stage.
Wow.
True freedom, according to this framework, is the successful exercise of these 5 steps.
So if I order the salad, that entire 5-step chain, perception, preservation, memory, inference, it finally will. That whole process is what makes the choice free.
Yes, and if you break any link in that chain, your agency just collapses.
Because the engine stalls.
Exactly. Like if you suffer from severe amnesia and you lose preservation, well, inference fails because you have no data to compare.
Right.
If you lose perception, like if you're unconscious, the will just sits dormant. The intellect is a biological mechanism, but free will is its direct output.
So you aren't this magical Descartes being disconnected from nature, but you also aren't Spinoza's blind stone either.
Exactly. You are a biological entity equipped with a highly sophisticated analytical engine.
Okay, I love that. That structural breakdown makes a lot of logical sense.
Oh.
But honestly, it leaves a pretty massive gap in the theory.
Oh, how so?
Well, if we all come equipped with this perfect 5-step analytical engine for rational choice, why do we constantly act so impulsively?
Oh, right.
Like, why do we experience road rage or make terrible split-second decisions where we act exactly like Spinoza's flying stone?
That is the big question. And to answer why the engine sometimes gets entirely bypassed, the text actually takes this really fascinating detour into evolutionary biology.
Wait, really? Evolutionary biology in this context?
Yeah, to explain the origins of our irrational emotions. The author pushes back really heavily against evolutionary thinkers like Lamarck or Herbert Spencer.
But what did they think?
Well, they hypothesized that the unconscious, like our blind automated instincts, that those evolved first.
Mhm.
and that the conscious intellect developed much, much later as this sort of higher-level evolutionary bonus.
Right, like we started as dumb beasts and eventually grew big brains.
Exactly. But the author flips that timeline completely.
Wait, how do you flip that?
The author argues that the very first, most microscopic living organism must have possessed those 5 pillars of intellect in some rudimentary form just to be able to survive in a hostile environment.
Okay, hold on. A microbe with intellect.
Well, think about the biological reality of, like, a single-celled organism, say a paramecium swimming in a drop of water.
Okay.
For it to survive, it must sense a toxic chemical gradient in the water, which is a rudimentary form of perception.
Right.
It must compare that input to its biological imperative to live, which is a microscopic form of inference.
Oh, wow.
And it has to move its cilia to swim away, which is will. The text argues that if it didn't have a baseline version of perception and inference, it would just sit entirely passive and die.
So the premise here is that conscious intellect, like the ability to perceive an environment and make a calculated movement, that actually had to be the original default state of life, not just a late-stage evolutionary add-on.
Exactly.
But wait, if pure intellect came first, where do the messy, irrational emotions come from, like anger or fear?
Time, repetition, and the immense metabolic cost of thinking.
The cost of thinking.
Yeah, the author explains that over millions of generations, as organisms repeatedly interacted with their reality, they developed automated responses, because running that full 5-step analytical engine, it's exhausting and it's slow.
Oh, I see.
Right? If an organism repeatedly encounters something harmful, the long, slow process of inferring danger eventually crystallizes into the automated shortcut of fear.
Wow.
And a repeated encounter with something beneficial crystallizes into joy or desire.
So emotions are basically evolutionary macros. They're shortcuts.
That's a perfect way to put it, yes.
Like if a predator jumps out of the brush at you, you do not want your brain running the full software. You don't want to go, perception, I see sharp teeth. Remember, teeth cause lacerations. Inference lacerations lead to blood loss, so I should probably flee.
Right, the lion eats you while you're still on step 4.
Exactly. You want the automated shortcut of sheer terror to just bypass the intellect entirely and immediately trigger a sprint.
Yes. And the text draws a very sharp, crucial boundary here that modern psychology actually frequently blurs.
That's the boundary.
It separates emotion from instinct.
Okay, how are they different in this framework?
In this text, emotion is purely psychological. It's the internal, subjective feeling of rage or fear or joy. But instinct is the physical, muscular execution of that emotion.
Ah, okay. So the emotion is the psychological state of fury, but the instinct is the biological hardware actually kicking, like your adrenal glands firing, your face flushing red, your fists involuntarily clenching up.
Exactly. And because these emotional shortcuts and their accompanying physical instincts were built over thousands of years specifically to bypass the slow intellect, they operate completely outside of those 5 pillars.
So they are deterministic.
Precisely. When you are acting purely on emotion, you are operating deterministically. You are just responding to ancient evolutionary programming.
Oh, man. This sliding scale between the slow, free intellect and the fast, determined emotions. This is how the author finally solves the determinism versus free will puzzle, isn't it?
Yes, it all comes together right here. A human's actual level of free will in any given moment is directly proportional to how much their intellect manages to intervene in those automated emotions.
So it's a battle.
A constant battle. And the author defines sanity not just as the absence of mental illness, but as the active state of freedom where your intellect actually dominates your emotions.
In madness.
Madness is defined as a deterministic state. It's when your inherited emotions completely dominate your intellect.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's kind of like driving a car, right?
How do you mean?
Well, free will is like driving a car with a manual transmission. When you're driving manual, you are highly engaged. You perceive the road, you recall how the clutch works, you infer exactly when to shift gears based on your speed.
Right, you're using all the pillars.
Exactly. You're using all 5 pillars, and you are in total control of the vehicle. But determinism is like when you get tired, you slap on the adaptive cruise control, and you just let the car's automated sensors take over.
Oh, that's good.
Right. And if a deer jumps out and your cruise control miscalculates and steers you into a ditch, you weren't really driving in that moment. You surrendered the wheel to the automated system.
That analogy perfectly dismantles Spinoza's most famous examples, actually.
Oh, the crying baby and the drunkard.
Yeah. Remember how Spinoza looked at the drunkard babbling, the terrified coward running, the angry child lashing out? Spinoza looked at them and concluded that because they have no free will, no human has free will.
Right, so Spinoza was basically looking at people who were asleep at the wheel with the cruise control engaged, and he just assumed the car simply didn't have a steering wheel at all.
Exactly. The author points out that the drunkard, the child, the terrified coward, these are highly specific anomalies.
They aren't the baseline?
No, they are instances where the intellect has been temporarily suppressed. Like alcohol chemically impairs the inference pillar.
Right.
Absolute terror overrides memory. A child's preservation pillar simply hasn't gathered enough data yet.
That makes so much sense.
In those specific moments, their intellect is dormant, so their biological emotions just take the wheel. They are determined in that moment. But a rational adult, sitting calmly and calculating a decision using all 5 faculties, they are exercising absolute free will.
But wait, this psychological sliding scale, it creates a massive philosophical and, well, theological problem. Yeah. If our level of freedom fluctuates wildly based on whether our intellect or our biological cruise control is currently winning the internal battle, how can a perfectly just God hold humans accountable for their actions?
That is the ultimate question, and the author shifts focus right here to demonstrate how perfectly this psychological framework actually maps onto Islamic theology.
Okay, let's get into the theology part.
The text argues that the Quranic view sits directly in the middle of this debate, acknowledging both our determined evolutionary biology and our absolute intellectual freedom.
Interesting. Because I know the text highlights verses that address our determined nature first, right?
Yeah.
Specifically, Surah Al-Marai, verses 19 through 21.
Yes.
And those verses describe humanity as being created inherently anxious, prone to panic when touched by hardship, and incredibly withholding or stingy when touched by good fortune.
Right. And from the author's psychological perspective, that verse is a direct acknowledgement of our evolutionary programming.
The automated shortcuts.
Exactly. We come pre-installed with the biological emotions of fear and greed because, well, those traits kept our ancestors alive. We are wired to panic and hoard. That is our deterministic baseline.
But then the text also brings in Surah Al-Insan, verse 3, where God states that he has shown humanity the way, leaving it entirely up to the individual to choose whether to be grateful or ungrateful.
Right. So God acknowledges the deep, determined pull of that biological anxiety, but demands that humans use the 5 pillars of their intellect to hit the brakes on those emotions.
Oh, I see.
You might feel the evolutionary urge to hoard your resources out of fear, but your inference pillar calculates that charity is morally superior and spiritually beneficial. The entire mechanism of divine testing is based on this exact friction between the automated emotion and the conscious intellect.
Okay, but what about the verses that sound just purely deterministic? Like the text addresses Surah Ibrahim, verse 4, which states that God guides whom he wills and sends astray whom he wills.
Right, the classic determinist verse.
Yeah. A strict determinist reads that and immediately concludes, well, God is just programming certain dominoes to fall into the trash. It's all predetermined.
But the author interprets that verse not as arbitrary cruelty, but as the deployment of customized environments designed to test the intellect.
Customized environments.
Yeah. When the text says God sends someone astray, the author suggests this means God uses divine wisdom to place that specific person in frustrating, highly challenging situations, like putting massive obstacles in their path.
But why would putting obstacles in someone's path be a form of divine wisdom? That seems counterintuitive.
Because a perfectly smooth path allows the intellect to just remain dormant.
Oh, yeah.
If you face no friction, your cruise control handles everything. You don't have to think. An obstacle forces the 5 pillars to wake up. It forces the individual to perceive the problem, infer a solution, and exercise their will.
That's fascinating.
And conversely, granting someone immediate ease and good fortune might be exactly what their specific intellect needs at that exact moment to finally infer the concept of gratitude. God is manipulating the environmental variables to force the intellect to engage.
Wow. And the text anchors this entire theological argument with a very powerful hadith from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, right?
Yeah.
Regarding the actual creation of the intellect itself.
Yes. The hadith states that when God first created the intellect, he tested its obedience, commanding it to advance and then retreat.
Okay.
And after the intellect proved its capacity to respond, God declared it his most beloved creation, stating, "By you I command, by you I punish, and by you I reward."
By you I punish, and by you I reward. I mean, that single line completely synthesizes the biology, the psychology, and the theology of the author's entire argument. Accountability is inextricably tethered to the active intellect.
Exactly. It's the ultimate justification for why, both in this philosophical framework and honestly in practical legal systems around the world today, we do not punish animals. We do not hold infants morally or legally accountable. We do not imprison someone who is genuinely medically insane.
Because their pillars are broken.
Yes. Their 5 pillars, perception, preservation, memory, inference, and will, are either physically unformed or functionally dormant. If the analytical engine is broken, the person is trapped in a deterministic state.
They aren't driving.
Right. If you cannot engage the 5 pillars, you cannot be free, and therefore you cannot be guilty.
Man, when we pull back and look at the scope of this deep dive, it is just a remarkable journey.
It really is.
I mean, we start with Spinoza trying to convince us that we are nothing more than conscious rocks hurled through the air by biological winds, completely delusional about our own agency.
Right.
And we looked at Descartes, who tried to protect human freedom by entirely divorcing our minds from the biological reality of nature.
But the author offers this profoundly empowering alternative. We do have an ancient deterministic emotional programming running in the background, built for raw survival. But we also possess a precise 5-step analytical engine. We are determined only when we lazily surrender to our automated instincts, but we are absolutely fundamentally free the exact moment we use our intellect to evaluate our reality.
So, for you listening, think about the last time you were about to make a snap decision out of pure anger or anxiety or just defensive pride.
We all do it.
Exactly. The next time you feel that sudden surge, just pause. Ask yourself in that exact moment, are you driving the car, or is your evolutionary cruise control driving you? Are you running the data through your 5 pillars, or are you just a rock flying through the air?
Which leaves us with a really provocative, perhaps slightly unsettling implication to mull over.
What's that?
If our free will expands the more we actively use our conscious intellect to override our emotions, does that mean freedom isn't just a static human right we are passively born with?
Oh, wow.
It suggests that free will is actually a mental muscle. It's something we have to constantly, daily work out and engage just to avoid slipping back into being Descartes' biological meat machines.
Now there's a thought to keep you awake tonight. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of the mind. Keep questioning your choices, keep engaging that intellect, and we'll see you next time.